Hey guys, so today I'm going to be showing you something that's pretty simple, but it is one of the very important fundamentals of drawing, and that's shading. So I'm going to show you how to shade in shapes and just do a lot of cool different things that you can do with almost any drawing, because shading always adds depth to a picture, even if it's just like a simple cartoon. So that's what I'm going to be showing you today. So when it comes to shading, we can shade any picture we want. I thought what would be a good example is right here on my notebook where I keep all my papers. You can see some examples of what shading can do, and you can do it with black and white as you see here, or you can do it with color even, and these are just color pencil examples. And so shading, it does mean drawing shadows and things like that, but it also means showing where a certain light source is coming from. And let me show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to try and draw a lemon just like on the front of this notebook here. And remember, again, we want to draw lightly so we can erase our lines if we need to. Now, when you decide where your light source is coming from in your picture, that is going to help you determine where you want to place your shadows. So say I want my light source to be coming from this direction. And you can have it coming from this side, from underneath, from directly on top. And I'm going to have mine coming at an angle. So that means if the light is coming from this direction, then the shadows are going to be on the opposite. So a good example would be this lemon sitting here. I'm going to start drawing my shadow that's going to be going away from the light source. Like even back in the olden days when people wanted to know what time it was during the day, what they would do is they would look at the direction of the shadows and it would tell them where the sun was in the sky. It's kind of a similar idea here, because that way the drawing will look consistent. And this is what also adds a more realistic tone to it. And you can draw anything. You could draw just a regular circle or an apple or an orange, or just a basic shape that you can use to practice this technique. And remember that the place that's farthest from the light source is going to be the darkest. So in this sense, it's going to be right around here, right where the lemon is sitting there. And the light source can't even get to that because this is in the way. So that's going to be our darkest area. And you can always smudge a little bit. Usually you should use another paper or a paper towel or something to smudge, because the oil on your fingers usually can sometimes ruin the paper. But I'm just doing this today for the sake of example. If you want to smudge a little bit with your fingers, it's okay, but it's just a good thing to know. All right, so now what a lot of people are attempt to do is that we have our shadow here. That also means there's going to be shadows here. But what you want to do is you want to make them a little bit lighter so they stand out from the base shadow right here. And in drawing, using light and dark as contrasting colors is very important. Not only to make something look realistic, but just to make something pop. And if we observe the real world, that's how we can come to understand the way shadows and light work. So obviously, this part is going to be most exposed to the light, and that's why it's going to be the lightest part. And sometimes, in certain cases, you sometimes want to leave it just completely white. That way there's a really big contrast between all these dark shadows back here and this light spot right here. And it really helps when you have a pencil that isn't super sharp, as you can see right here. Super sharp pencils are nice when you're doing details, but when you're trying to shade, it's best to have something that's just about so-so. Something that you can even draw at an angle with instead of drawing like this. It's best if you just put it to the side. It just makes it a lot easier, and it makes the shading a lot more smoother. So that's one example. Like I said, you can do this with pretty much anything. I'm going to draw a couple more things just to give you an idea. And this, because lemons kind of have a textured outer peel to them. And so you can even kind of draw in that texture a little bit if you want to. And that's one thing I always found amazing about art, is just a few simple steps can make something look so real and can just and can just really pop off the paper. Another good example would be just doing a sphere. And it's alright if you can't draw perfect circles off the bat, I still can't either. But again, like if we have our light source here, it's really cool because right now, this just looks flat. It just looks like a bunch of scribbles on a paper. But with the magic of shading, we're able to make this look almost 3D. I'm going to show you what I mean. So again, our light's coming from here, and because this is a circle, the shadow is going to have sort of a spherical shape to it as well. And what might be a fun thing to do is just find any object in your home and place it in front of you and then try and draw it. Just a very simplified version of it, and draw a shadow. And even if you want to use the actual light source and whatever object you're looking at, like say the light's coming from the left or the right, then that's what you would draw with your object. So again, this shadow is going to be fairly dark. It's probably going to be one of the darkest parts of the drawing right here. Right under here is probably going to be the darkest area of the shadow, because this is where we know the light is absolutely not hitting at all, and that's why it's going to be dark. And if you really want to blend and smooth things out, you're welcome to do that. I sort of just leave mine kind of sketchy and messy. But if you really want to get lines down nicely, then you're welcome to do that as well. Also, the way your shadow lays is going to depend on where your object is in comparison to whatever it's sitting on, like the ground or a table. And so sometimes it's good to know where that might be behind the picture. All right, so now we have our shadow. What we're going to do now is we're actually going to leave a little area right here. Now this isn't going to be quite as dark because we want to differentiate where the shadow begins and where the object ends, or vice versa, depending on what you're drawing. And then this part is going to be very dark, because even though while it's not completely away from the light, it's the furthest away, and that's why it's going to be the darkest area of the circle. And again, you also want to make this dark, but not as dark as the shadow. Not quite as dark. And the trick to this is as you go out closer and closer to where the light is hitting, you want to release pressure from your pencil, like not be pressing down as hard. And you want to slowly, slowly have it get lighter and lighter and lighter, all the way up until it's going to be just completely white again. Just like this. And what a cool thing is that these techniques can be used for any drawing. It doesn't necessarily have to be circles or shapes or pieces of fruit. It can be anything, because if you think about drawing an animal or a person, like even just drawing a face, if you decide where you want your light source coming from, that's where you would proceed to put in all the shadows. And if you notice, it usually takes a little bit of layering to do this. Sometimes we have to go over a certain area multiple times before we like the way it looks, because we want the transition from light to dark to be as smooth as possible. And that's why the pencil you're using is also going to help. Just like this. Always want to remember to leave an area that's going to be almost completely white. And you can even make the line a little lighter too right there. even though this isn't a perfect circle shape. That's why we have erasers. We can always tweak things and make them look exactly the way we want them to. And whatever you need to draw for your guidelines, that way it looks proportional or looks the way you want, is always a good thing. Another thing to know is that the direction you put your pencil in also helps. I know that for smoother shading, going in the same direction really is helpful. If you noticed, I didn't just draw straight lines going all over the place. I drew lines that were going in the shape of the sphere, so in like a circle shape. It makes it a lot easier instead of having multiple lines all scratching around, because then it's not going to look as smooth and it's not going to look as cohesive with the rest of the drawing. So that's another good tip, is that always draw in the direction of your shape. Same thing if we were doing like a triangle. Let's do this for example. It's best to be going in lines that are vertical, just like this, because that mimics the shape of our triangle. Now I'm doing horizontal lines to go over it, because that can create sort of a smoothing effect over the lines, just like that. So really, there are many different ways to shade. And I would say one thing that is a very popular technique, especially when you're drawing with pencils and pens, is something called cross-hatching. Now, cross-hatching is meant to be, it's meant to be not as smooth as this. So let me draw one more triangle and show you what I mean. So when we cross-hatch, we actually want our lines to be very bold and noticeable. The idea behind cross-hatching is that you keep going in different directions with your lines. Always starting out very dark and then getting lighter as you get closer to where your light source is coming from. And you can even blend those in a little bit too. If you ever read certain books or look at certain art, like certain illustrations in books might have this type of cross-hatching style, which I think is really fun. And it's just meant to be kind of sketchy and messy looking, but that's kind of the appeal of it. Because you can get a similar effect, but you don't have to be so worried about making the shading look perfect and completely blended together. And the way you make it look darker is by going in different directions over and over and over the same area until you get the desired effect. Now, I know that these are really simple things, and maybe some people might think it's boring, but the point of this is that this is going to help you draw anything better. Anything you want to draw, these fundamentals are going to help you. And while it might not be that interesting to draw shapes or just really basic things, practicing with those is going to help you master it. So when you're ready to move on to faces, or if you want to draw landscapes or any other inanimate object, say you want to draw a car or a person, these techniques are going to help you every single time. And you can even blend techniques together just to give it a bit of a different look. So that's all I have for today, guys. But I want you guys to practice this, and I promise you, even though it can be difficult, it's going to be worth it. Because this is one of the fundamentals of learning how to draw. And it's just going to help you all around. So just keep practicing, don't give up. And remember, when you mess up, you can always try again. So good luck, and I'll see you guys next week.